Thank you.
When you've looked at them recently, have you noticed a marked change in their style? Obviously, having lost Luke Gale, such a pivotal player for them.
Not a marked change. I mean, they're playing a little bit different. I wouldn't say it's dramatic. I think there's still some things that work for them. Gale is obviously such an important part for them, but they're not completely lost without him either. You know, they've got some decent players in there, so I think the systems and the structure that they play to is very similar. But you know, you might argue it's less effective. I think, therefore, you look at us and against them, and the enthusiasm that I thought they maybe lacked against Saints. They lacked some defensive enthusiasm against Saints in parts of the game. I just know that's not going to be there against us. You know, they're going to be on top of their defensive game against us. And you know, part of the preview process that we go through, we look at other teams. Quite often we would say, look, this is what they're doing, this is how they look. We know that's not going to be like that against us. So you've got to decide what we show the players, what we want to focus on, based on the images that we see in the 2 or 3 weeks building up to us, because some of it just won't be relevant, because they'll play differently, they'll act differently, they'll have more energy. So I don't think that there's a huge difference in what they're doing, although there are some differences.
Given how the Rhinos fought back in that first game at Ellen Road earlier in the season, is there a different feeling within the squad going into this Magic weekend meeting compared to a year ago when we were hoping we could get back at them, but again they able to put the ball clear?
Do you know, and this is the interesting thing, for the last 3 or 4 times we've played them, we've been really confident. For the last 3 or 4 times that we've played them, we've been in the dressing rooms and had a real focus on what we want to do, especially for the start. Previous to that, I think Castleford were beating us, and and I'm talking but way back in 2014, maybe 2015. Were getting some results against us, and maybe I were guilty of not really taking too much note. And I'm thinking, well, that's more about us than about them. And you look back, and they've been consistent with their attack. Some of the stuff they're trying to do, they were doing back then. So for the last, you know, from 2015, 2016 onwards, certainly we've been really up for it, really a real focused prep. Yet we hadn't come up with the result. Certainly we hadn't come up with the start. So you know, that's a big focus for us to start the game.
And both coaches, when they reflected on last year's Magic weekend, talked about how exhausted their sides were at half time in that game. Is it important to be able to preserve some energy in an atmosphere? It was
an intense game. It was a really intense game, and while we weren't at the races to start with at Magic, I didn't think we were too far off. And you know, in Castleford, you know, just pulled away from us in the second half. And you're right, Daryl said to us after the game, said to me and my staff after the game that you know, that was as an intense a game his team had been involved in for a number of weeks, and certainly for us, you know, and we know again it's going to be an intense game. And they're becoming like the Saints. Every time we play Saints, for some reason, they're just mega intense games. The ball's in play, there's not many stoppages. And my players normally come off the field against Saints gassed, more so than most other teams. And the cast fixtures are becoming like that.
In terms of your team, Carl Ablett came off injured last week. Is he 100% for this week?
No, he's not. He won't play, Carl. He's rolled his ankle there over at Widnes, and let's hope he hasn't been in the boot, which is always a good sign. But there's just a bit too much pain there at the moment. He'd normally play busted, Cal. Quite often he'd play with something strapped up that would keep most people off the field. So for him to tell us that he's not right, you know it's like a busted ankle. He's properly hurting. But weirdly, he could be available next week. In terms of damage and in terms of long-term damage, I don't think there's much there. But we're going to need some bodies that are not carrying. We're going to need some people that can get to places even though they're tired. And I think the wise thing is just to let Carl stand down for a week.
You mentioned last week about the strange party trick of Ryan Hall and his shoulder. Have you ever come across anything like that before?
I've never come across anybody like Ryan Hall before. Did Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon used to pop his shoulder in the film as a party trick and put it back in by knocking it on a wardrobe or something like that? I don't know whether Ryan did that, but you see the gymnasts you know, the people that do the rings and do the crucifix, and they can sublux the shoulders and dislocate them and all that. I don't know whether that's what Ryan did. I didn't go further in it when he said, I used to do it as a kid, you know. I said, okay, and just left it, you know, put it in with the other stuff that I used to do all the time. So, so he's got loose shoulders, and I don't think he's completely pain-free, Ryan, but he's ready to play.
Be pleased with how Jack Walker made his comeback last week. He had a couple of contributions in the win at Widnes. Yeah,
for sure. His kick returns are excellent. He finds the ground really well. You know, he starts a lot of our offensive stuff, our yardage game. I was involved in a try saver and some big defensive efforts as well. So it's good to have him back.
Are you likely to have anyone else back over the next few weeks?
Yeah, we're coming close, aren't we? We're coming close, and Liam Sutcliffe, what they do with these, usually with these bony injuries, the tendons you can predict, in my experience, and the muscle tears you can predict, but the bony injuries sometimes just plateau out, and it's anybody's guess when it starts to be pain-free. And Sutty's got a bony injury in his foot, which, you know, I've been told a couple of weeks, but it could be 3, it could be 4. It's all to do with how he turns up after a day's running. What they do is they run them for a day, then they rehab for a day, then they make them run again. Now he's running on the Alter G, which you sit in a bit of a harness, and you've only got a certain amount of percentage of your weight on a treadmill, and it keeps you off the treadmill. And they'll increase the weight gradually. So he's on the Alter G at the moment, running at a certain percentage of his weight, and if there's no reaction to that, then they'll increase the weight. If there's no reaction to that, you get to a stage where he can run freely, and he's not doing that just yet. Now, once he's up and running freely, he'd need to have at least 3 or 4 sessions under his belt before we can throw him on a field and say, you're right to go. And that's if we put him back in straight in the starting team. He's been out for a number of weeks, and he's going to have some cobwebs there. So Garbutt's the same, Mitch Garbutt's the same, in that he's got the bony injury, he's had some drilling done in his knee, and you know, that's just not recovering quite as fast as we'd hoped. So yeah, there's a couple there that we're waiting on that may well be back within a month, but I can't tell you.
Is there some extra caution with Liam, given that he had a reoccurrence of that injury last time?
That's the key. I mean, he hasn't had it opted on. You know, he's had it rehabbed, intense rehab as well. And Al Jones, the doc, said if we rush him back and just throw him straight in there, and it goes again, he's going to have to have an operation on it, and then that's the big one. You start opening the foot up, and you pretty much write your season off. So we've got to be tread carefully on that. Excuse the pun. Tread carefully.